you mind telling us a little bit what it was like growing up with a mom that was working this much? Because I think that's always really interesting.
Growing up was different we were different than the other kids because our mom worked. And at the time when I was a small child, women could be a nurse, a secretary, or a teacher outside of the home. And my mom, of course, wanted to do stuff. She didn't really want to be a homemaker. So she was unusual. Her story is very interesting and a whole different one from what you just asked me. But growing up, she was a single mother too. And so my sister and I had a nanny-ish type person who was called a housekeeper who would care for us while my mother worked. And it really affected my sister more than me. I was just kind of kicking along used to it. But my older sister was like, why don't you make us cookies, Mom? How come you're never here when I come home? What, those kind of questions. And I know it made my mom feel a little bit guilty, but she was doing what she wanted to do to fulfill herself.
So when did you realize that you had the same bug as your mom?
I was very independent, just like my mother. And so I moved out of her house as soon as I could, probably sooner than I should have, but I did, and made my way through various beginner type jobs. I realized that I wanted to get some kind of I didn't really have a degree. I didn't go to college. The rule was if I went to college, I had to live in a dorm, and I didn't want to live in a dorm. And so at that time, I went to some college classes on my own. I decided I was going to pursue my certified professional secretary designation, which used to be a worldwide organization back in the day that you could go through all these areas of study and take tests and have experience and get this designation called CPS, which I decided I wanted to get because I wanted to start my own secretarial service. So that was my entrepreneurial drive. Was I knew I had the skills for that kind of work, but I didn't really like working for other people because I was too independent. So I started a secretarial service. Timely, I had a baby. My husband lost his job, and it was time to make a go of this or forget about it. And luckily, I found a situation where I had an office downtown. Personal computers were brand new. I knew how to use it. A lot of the businessmen had no idea. So this was very, very good for a successful start of my business. It was called Professional Secretarial, and I grew that for 7 years. And that's when my mother started seeing that I had entrepreneurial ability.
Oh, the recruitment, the family recruitment. We call it the call. Then came the call.
There was a call. And I was uncertain if we could even work together because we're both two strong-headed women. And so what I was doing was I was having my employee run my business for a while I would take some time to see if I could work with my mother. So I was taking a few days a week and working in her business. Of course, driving everyone there nuts. But that was how we started. And then we came to the idea that I would sell my business and join hers.
Was it what you expected when you joined? What were the things that surprised you about the family business once you sort of became active in it?
When I was a child, I never thought I would be in the business. We were never encouraged to be in the business. My mother's parents had a floral shop, and they always wanted her to be in their business. And it basically drove her away somewhat. And she didn't want to live in a tiny town in Minnesota. So she wanted to make sure that she didn't try and do that to her kids. So she never mentioned it growing up, ever. And we never considered it. So when she called and was like, hey, I'm going to retire someday, I might be interested in passing it along to you, I wasn't ready for it, really. But then this transition period where I went to see what she was doing, learn a little bit what I could, see who was there, that kind of warmed me up to what was going on. Then it was decided I would sell my business. I did sell my business at the end of December. And then I took a couple weeks off. And then I started on a January 2nd. So on that, thinking back to that time, I know that I was not very popular because I asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And my job was to learn everyone's job. And I did have quite a great administrative background due to my business and my CPS training. And so that was something that I think my mother wanted, was somebody who had really good administration. And you know that when you have your family, that they've got your back. They're not going to be trying to find ways to screw you over, hopefully. So I started asking a lot of questions, and I noticed that there was some things going on that she was not aware of. And so I'd ask the question, Mom, how come one of your sales reps is living at the coast and calling your secretary to write up her orders and turn them in? What's she getting paid for? So I wasn't very popular because I was pointing these kinds of things out. But, my mom liked it. She was like, oh, I didn't know that was going on,
Well,
so.
I mean, it's so interesting, Nancy, because it's kind of like the second gen cleanup. So how long did it take until your unpopularity turned into everyone realizing that what you were doing was essential to the survival of the company?
I mean, a couple of other things. One was I decided that we should become women certified because we weren't. And I'm like, well, we have this certification available to us. And my mom said, oh, we don't need that. I'm like, well, it might help. And she's like, well, we can do anything that the men can do. And I'm like, I know, but we can get this and maybe we can get ahead. So I went ahead and did that. And it's been huge for the company. It has helped with the growth. And then the other thing that at the time, there was quite a bit of, this was the early 90s, and our government was cracking down on independent contractors. And when I looked at that, I could see that we were a prime target because the people that weren't really employees were being treated like employees. And so I convinced everyone that we needed to have our salespeople be employees. And of course, the salespeople grumbled quite a bit until a month or so afterwards. And then they're like, this is a much better deal.
Much more stability. Yeah. Okay.
Well, they had nobody likes change, but what they learned is they were now getting health insurance and they didn't have to pay as much taxes.
Fair
Just
point. Yeah.
so yeah, so they kind of came around, but I was still the owner's kid, and you know how that goes. Everyone looks at you. When my mom started, everyone was looking at her because they were like, what? A woman in business? Ha ha, this will be funny. So, but she proved them wrong. And then when I came along, oh, the owner's kid, right? They're going to get all the breaks. Everything's going to be easy. And just like my mother, you have to work harder to prove yourself.
I'm very fascinated by the psychological process of like, how do we say, like, these transitions? How do we make those easier on ourselves without feeling that our sense of purpose and our sense of worth sort of is like lost without the business? Do you know what I mean?
I think it's probably easier for the second generation than the first. Someone once asked my mother and I that if I had the same passion for the business as she had. And I said, no. I was right in front of her. And she said, of course she doesn't. I founded the thing. It was my baby. She's just keeping it going. So that was all understood, that it wasn't like I didn't have the same amount of passion as she did. I still had the drive to be an independent business owner. When it comes to my son, he's also very independent. The one thing that's been hard is being the boss at work and then turning it off at home, because you have this go, 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 answer direct kind of mentality at work, some days worse than others. And then you come home and I don't know, I don't even want to decide what to eat for dinner. I'm just so
Yeah.
sick of decisions. But so, yeah, it's a different dynamic. And I know at one point my husband had to tell me that I was too bossy.
How
So,
did that go?
I mean, it's true. I probably
Yeah.
was. It was just a knee jerk reaction of how I had been operating. So I will not miss that. As far as it being my baby, I sold a baby. I sold my other business and that I had founded. I think at that business, I had actually gotten to a level where I either needed to grow or sell. And so the selling was what happened because I didn't have the money to grow at that point, and it was becoming a little bit stale for me.
But so I find this really interesting. So comparing your situation to what your son goes through, right? Like, because I think what's interesting about your story, of course, is that you technically had proof that you could have done it alone, right? Like, and I think that's a really different way of joining the family business as well, right? Like, so you had done what your mom had done essentially. And it's almost like you came in at eye level, if that makes any sense, right? Like, and I think that's probably also why she called you in, right? Like, because she could
Yes.
see that, like that respect had to be there because you had done it, right? Like, which again, something that 99% of the businesses can't do is to get beyond the second year, right? Like, which everyone tends to forget. But so you got into that point, you got into the point where you could actually, you had something to sell, let's put it this way. So like again, like contrasting that maybe to like I don't know how much of your son's career was outside of the business, like, you know, and what he did and stuff like that, but how do you feel in retrospect, like, you know, do you feel like that really did level the playing field a little bit between your mom and you and sort of like
Oh,
made it
yes.
easier?
Oh, yes. Yes, she knew that I could manage. We decided after I sold my business that we would give it 1 year to see if we killed each other or not. And we didn't. So that's when we did the buy sell agreement. We had desks that were facing each other.
Wow.
So we got along
Intense.
really well, actually. It was amazing because we thought pretty much alike about most things. And I mean, she wanted my help. So she was very happy to give me power. If that, I mean, I'm not remembering every detail. I know I had to learn everyone's job and drive them all nuts while I was doing that. So she saw me in action and she knew that that was good. And it's a good thing because we didn't have a lot of time. Whereas with my son, he had just lost a job and he came and asked for a job. And I had wanted him to work around more and learn more before I even thought about him working for me. But he came, he needed, Peter was there, my husband. So I decided, okay, we'll see what you can do. That was in 2005. So it's been, you know, quite a long time that he's grown into the business. He's actually done quite well. So he has certain gifts that I don't. I have things that he doesn't. So for a short time, we had 4 of our family people working in the business.
I have a last question for you in terms of like you brought in this digitalization era where like, you know, because your knowledge of computers and processes then benefited the business, I'm sure, enormously, right? And we know that there's no denying that we live in a time where technology is taking an exponential sort of like growth direction. Because you've seen various cycles in your career, like, you know, how do you qualify this time with regards to your business, and how do you think your son and your daughter-in-law are going to have to make changes, or what will they have to change about the business, do you think, to remain competitive? What's sort of your vision on that?
We've been a relationship business. There are businesses in our field that are basically all digital all the time, no people. The clients that we have, I think, like the interaction and the human thought. What we are fearing for the future, and I don't have to hopefully think about too much, is this AI, artificial intelligence. When I came to Marco in 92, amazingly, my mother had purchased one of the very first computers for our industry. And that was in the late 70s. So she'd been on this computer for quite a while. That's when they lasted a long time. and, and there was this gigantic IBM mainframe that had terminals. So we were in the computer age. But yes, I have a lot of skills to bring to that. I thought it was so funny the day we finally got rid of that system. And we couldn't help it. We had to open up the box, because this big box, and it had this little tiny, teeny weeny little thing inside that held these 8-inch floppy disks that we would use.
Yeah. I remember the floppy disks. I love them. I miss
These are
them.
huge, though. They were 8 inches.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And what I'm afraid of, or not, I guess I'm afraid of it, is having to learn more technology. And you can't not. It's just part of it. So that's a great time to exit.